Hello and good afternoon again. My name is Tan Harrison. I'm the Associate Director for Career Development, and we are here with John Fugate. Did I say that correct, John?
Yep.
Who is a UIC alum, and he is here as a talent acquisition specialist to offer advice on how to navigate the market. Let me give you a little more background about John. As I mentioned, he's an alum of UIC and currently a talent acquisition manager at Donnelly Financial Solutions. He has over 10 years of experience in staffing for Fortune 500 companies in financial, digital, entertainment, and manufacturing industries. Throughout his career, John has partnered with hiring managers in IT, sales, finance, marketing, and human resources to fill entry-level to executive level roles. So we appreciate him taking time out of his busy schedule to come and talk to us about how to navigate the job market. So I present to everyone, John Fugate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tan, and thank you so much for organizing this. And thank you all for attending. And I hope you find this time valuable and learn a little something after we're done here. So, really want to take this time just to go over what we're covering during this session and just to really give you awareness into the talent acquisition process if you haven't been through it already. Things will be a little different now that you may be graduating college and kind of looking for different careers, different focused opportunities right now. So this workshop is really to give you insight from my perspective on what that process looks like and give you a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more confidence during this process. So moving forward into our itinerary, we're going to cover the job market, networking, resume writing, job searching, interviewing, and closing a job. Now, these all could actually cover about an hour each if I was to really dig deep into each section here, but really want to keep this as interactive as possible and just go over the real world applications for all of these subjects. Ask as many questions as you like. I can maybe defer some to the very end because some content we will be covering at a later section, but really want to give you as much power as you have during this talent acquisition process to get a job, because essentially it all comes down to you. The recruiter, the hiring manager, the people that you'll be interfacing with during this process are all here to kind of guide you along the way. But I really want to just kind of point that out, that this is within your power to make or break the job and to accept or decline the job. So really never forget that during this process, because as the candidate, you pretty much hold your own key here. So a little bit about me. Why should I listen to John Fugate, and why should his knowledge be something that I can use for my own knowledge? So I've been a part of recruiting for over 10 years, as Tan said. I've been both on the agency and the corporate in-house side. I've kind of seen it all. So on an average year, I speak to probably over 500 candidates and make somewhere between 60 to 120 hires a year. And really what I want to do during this time is let you know what I see, what works and what doesn't work, and really how you can use that to your advantage. So the good thing is that you're coming into a job market right now that is geared towards you, the candidate. This is a candidate market. There's around 11 million jobs right now, and roughly around 8 million to 9 million people that are actively looking for jobs. So as a pure supply and demand focus, the odds are in your favor, which is a nice thing, but it is going to create a little bit of bottlenecks along the way. One of those being is that there is a flux in recruiters even available to fill these jobs and hiring managers that have the time to interview people for these jobs. So I do want you to be aware of the market that you're coming into and what you're up against. It is, as I mentioned, geared towards you, the candidate, but there is going to be some opportunity for you to be picky and some opportunity for you to really seize the job that you want. We'll stop right there and we'll take a quick pause. Do we have any questions about the job market? Because I know that's on everybody's mind right now. And without going too much in depth about the Great Recession and all of that, it is worth noting either way. If not, we'll move right along.
Yeah, John, we don't have any questions at this point, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to type it into the chat. Oh, we do have a question. So the first question that is in the chat is, has there been any change for international students?
It depends on the industry and on the role that you're applying for. There definitely has been. There's been a, it's going to depend on the company that you're applying for and in the industry. So we'll take IT, for example, because I've focused a lot on IT jobs through my career, a lot on STEM students who are looking for any type of student visas or H-1B visas during that process. It has changed, but again, it's going to be specific to the IT job that you're applying for. If it's a very hard to fill job, you'll always have that opportunity to look for sponsorship. If it's a job that there's many candidates who do not require sponsorship to apply for, then it's going to be a little hard to receive that sponsorship. So as a general way of speaking, yes, it has changed, not to the favor of international students, to be quite honest with you.
So John, there was a follow-up to that question. When you said depends on the industry, the response was marketing. What about marketing, the marketing and advertising industry?
I'll be quite honest with you, and I'll say this very forthright. If I don't know the answer, I actually don't know. I can look that up in real time and get back to you, and we'll have an opportunity for you to connect with me on LinkedIn for any questions very specific to this, which this is a specific question. I don't deal with enough marketing-based candidates that require a visa sponsorship to make a knowledgeable statement on that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
No. I appreciate the interactiveness, and honestly, if there is something that stumps me, again, feel free to connect with me, and I could look that up for you in real time to see what the market says.
Awesome. I don't think we have any other questions at this point.
Very good. So moving into networking. Networking is going to be a big part of your ability to meet hiring managers, meet prospective recruiters, employers, and really build your base knowledge of the type of job that you want. I put a number of different networking platforms on here. The UIC Alum Association, I'll defer to Tan because she'll know a lot more about that than I would, but it is worth being a part of your alum and seeing what types of opportunities for networking are within your alumni association. But moving into more external types of sites. So I included Built-in and Fairy Godboss. These are platforms that we're using right now at the company that I work for. Now, Built-in is specific for technology jobs, IT-based jobs, and it basically creates a society for people looking for jobs, gives you an introspective kind of analysis on the companies that you're looking at, what they do, what their culture is like. And this may bleed over into different industries, but I know Built-in is more specific towards IT. Fairy Godboss is a really cool platform. This is more specific to women in any type of technology field or really any field. I know they do product and marketing and finance as well. And it gives you an opportunity to look at DEI initiatives for certain companies. Just a great platform for virtual careers as well. I've been a part of different virtual careers at career fairs, I should say, for Fairy Godboss, where it's basically like speed dating. So me, the recruiter, sits in and has the ability to meet with many different candidates within an hour, usually in 5-minute increments, and get to know them, what they're looking for, see if there's any open opportunities that we have. But from an employer perspective, gives the candidate the opportunity to learn a little bit more about defense. So those are two great platforms, and I think both of those do have virtual career fairs. For our sake of us timing and really learning about the key crucial platforms that you'll need in order to hit the ground running, we're going to be talking more about LinkedIn and Meetup because those are the go-to right now for social networking. So your new best friend is LinkedIn, and if you have not created a LinkedIn profile, I very much encourage you to do so. It is the #1 platform for recruiters to find candidates. I think as soon as you join LinkedIn and put yourself as the open to work little icon under your profile picture, you'll pretty much start receiving emails right away. Little tips about choosing your LinkedIn profile, your pictures, your experience, I would really look at LinkedIn as your digital resume. And I would actually encourage you, once you do create your LinkedIn profile, to include your LinkedIn URL on your resume, because whether you know it or not, most employers are going to be looking at your LinkedIn once you start applying. The majority of hiring managers that I deal with, the first thing that they'll say to me is I don't see that they're on LinkedIn. Why aren't they on LinkedIn? How does their experience on LinkedIn differ from their resume? I do hear that a lot as well. So I would definitely encourage you all to create a LinkedIn profile right away. And I've heard a lot of different subjects about the type of picture you should include. And I would really defer it to you. I mean, I know you want to be your unique self and your own self going into the market. And that's going to depend on the type of role that you're looking to get into. Now, if you're going into financial sales, it may be best to put in a suit and tie or a business professional outfit on your LinkedIn, because that's the type of industry you're going into. And that's the type of appearance that your employer may be looking at. If you're going into a startup software engineer role in a startup environment, you could wear a t-shirt and jeans. Like, there is no right or wrong way for creating your profile. I would really just defer it to you based on the type of role you're wanting to get into, the type of industry you're wanting to get into, and see what works and what doesn't work for you. Another thing that is highly recommended is start following companies that you're truly passionate to work for. So I'm going to cover this in some other slides, but I'll keep on saying this over and over, is companies want people to work for them that they want to work for. I know that kind of seems like a redundant statement. Of course, I want to work for a company that I'm applying to and interviewing at, but sometimes it doesn't show as much. And when you come to the interview with questions, with knowledge about the employer, and even that you're following the employer or following recruiters at the employer that you're looking to go into, it does make a huge difference. So we'll talk a little bit more about that to come. But if you're really passionate about working at Google, for example, start following Google. Start following certain influencers at these types of companies, like the CEO, that you want to follow his statements and his trends that he's posting on LinkedIn. Those are big deals. If you're really focused on a company, you can connect with recruiters at the company that you want to work for. And you could drop them a personalized note or not. It's really going to depend on your comfortability. But you could say something like, hey, I just applied to so-and-so role. Wanted to introduce myself to you. Looking forward to connecting in the future. Something that makes you stand out. And these are little things that you can do throughout the networking process, but it really does make a difference. I'm sorry, do we have a question?
We do have a question, but before I provide those questions, I'm going to kindly ask everyone to keep their sound muted so we won't have any interruptions in the background. But we do have a couple of questions if I may ask them.
Please.
Okay, so I have one response that says, I have heard mixed things about the hashtag open to work. Some people have said you should not use it. Do you think it's okay?
I definitely do. And thanks for asking that. That is something I've been reading more and more about as that hashtag and as that little symbol on the picture came about. At the bottom, at the end of the day, I do recommend using it. Now, the reason I do is if you are looking for a job, the recruiter is going to be going on your profile as well as many other profiles, and it's going to make you stand out at the end of the day. There is an option for me, the recruiter, to even put down looking for candidates who are open for work. And the reason why I would do that is because my time, just like your time, is valuable. The number of reach outs that I have is limited on LinkedIn, and I want to use it to the best of my ability. So I want to reach out to candidates that I believe are going to give me a better ratio of response. And that open to work hashtag, that open to work in my profile, is going to make me stand out at the end of the day. It's a great question. I just started reading more about that in these last few weeks, and I do see the point on why some folks think it's not worth putting it on there, or maybe would be a negative. I still think it's a positive.
I agree. I totally agree. And then our next question says, does LinkedIn have resources for people who want to be entrepreneurs?
Great question. I'm sure they do because they have everything. There are free LinkedIn learning courses and just learning courses in general outside of LinkedIn that you can utilize to get certifications and to kind of build your knowledge on entrepreneurship. Off the top of my head, I do not know what those are because I'm looking for people that want to work for my company and not be entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, it's probably a great resource that LinkedIn can provide.
Great. I have a couple of additional questions that are industry focused. Are there any sites besides LinkedIn and Handshake that data scientists should be looking at? Also, do you recommend a professional headshot for hiring sites?
For hiring sites such as a LinkedIn or hiring sites like a hired.com? Because I actually am going to go into that a little later on, but just want to make sure like there is Monster, there is ZipRecruiter. Geez, there's a lot right now.
He's there was participants specifically says for a LinkedIn in regards to the headshot.
I've been seeing a lot of LinkedIn commercials recently that say bring your true self forward in your LinkedIn photo, meaning don't use a professional headshot. I feel like any type of clear, presentable picture is fine. Do you actually need a professional headshot? It wouldn't hurt. But the way the trend is going, they're saying don't use a professional headshot. Use something that shows your true self. I'm mixed on it. I think a professional headshot is always great. Most of the executive people in the company that I work for are using professional headshots. I'll defer to you on the type of job that you're wanting to get, to be honest with you. Like, if you're going into a financial sales or finance or marketing, and it's extremely competitive and they're looking for people very client facing and putting that extra amount of effort in, it's probably going to help you.
Okay. And going back to the first question in regards to sites besides LinkedIn and Handshake for data scientists, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, so built-in, which I mentioned prior, is definitely focused on IT. So data science, data scientists would find that platform extremely valuable. I'm going to talk about Meetup in a little bit. And it's funny, I actually put in Meetup, upcoming Meetup groups that are doing meetups for data science types of roles. So there is a big platform out there for data scientists. There's groups within LinkedIn. If you literally just type in data science on LinkedIn, you'll find groups that focus on that type of field.
So I think if we get the rod, how long do we?
I'm going to again provide a friendly reminder for everyone to make sure you are muted so we won't have any interruptions during the presentation. So John, can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for the response to that question. And then I see that there is another question that states or asks, are there any specific networking platforms for engineering careers other than LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep referring to built-in because really anything IT encompasses jobs, employers, networks within the IT realm. So built-in is specific to built-in Chicago and it's nationwide right now. I would recommend going on there, checking it out. The company I work for has a profile on LinkedIn. It's one thing that we've used in order to focus on engineering IT talent. So that's a great platform. I'm going to give a little shout out right now to hired.com because hired.com has been used for both sales and IT based roles. There are some caveats with creating a hired.com platform or profile, I should say. I think you, if I'm not mistaken, you have to pay them a small portion of your salary the first year. Again, I'm not the expert on that. You'd have to talk with somebody from hired.com. But it gives you a very specific platform for the jobs that you're looking for in IT. And it basically guarantees you a job within the first month or 2 months because you're going on there to get a job and you're going to get actively recruited by hiring managers, recruiter on that platform.
Great, thank you. I think that's all the questions that we have at this point.
Good. Well, I'll move along to Meetup. So kind of going a little further there, it's a very useful tool to find groups in the industry that you want to pursue. There's companies that partner with Meetup Groups to host actual meetups and drive visibility to their own hiring initiatives. I've done that before at GE and at my current company. So you'll see certain types of groups. And I called out these three in particular because you'll kind of find the language within these meetups that will say, okay, this may be hosted by a company for the specific need of giving visibility to them, the employer, in the guise of an actual meetup. Now, I say in the guise because typically these meetup platforms don't want you to be actively recruited. They want you to go there to network, to build your skills, to engage with them. But that being said, if I'm hosting, I being the employer, am hosting a meetup in my company, we'll do a quick 5-minute shout out to say, hey, thank you for coming to this meetup. I want to let you know about our hiring initiatives. And then you'll learn a little bit more about what that company is doing, what they're hiring for, and how it should pretty much coincide with what that meetup is doing and what they're, talking about during that specific session. For IT, it's great. For finance, it's great. Honestly, you can go into meetup.com, create your profile, start linking with groups that you feel is the industry that you're looking at, and you'll probably find everything: marketing, finance, HR. There's literally endless amounts of groups on there that you can connect with. Any questions? We'll just move right along then. Okay, so now we're getting to the real deal. So the job search, and I put down looking for a job is a full-time job because essentially it is. Checking your emails, actually doing the interviews, meeting with the recruiters, the whole gamut is really a full-time job. And I would think about it as such when you start tweaking your resume to look at jobs that you really want to apply for, using all these different kinds of portals. I put in here Dice, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. I didn't put Glassdoor, but I should have. There's another great platform. Does it make a difference which one you want to use? It does not. So sites like Indeed and ZipRecruiter and Career Builder and Glassdoor, they're called scraper sites. And what that means essentially is I work at a company who has a career page and I'm posting roles on that career page. Sites like Indeed and ZipRecruiter and Career Builder will scrape those jobs, put it on their page. They won't post it actively saying this is for Donnelly Financial Solutions or for wherever. But once you click the apply button, you'll be sent to the application page for that company. So that's how you'll know. Now, I think it's more important to search the types of jobs within like a Google or whatever search engine you use to see what types of jobs are coming up. But whatever platform you like the most is the one you'll probably use. Whatever one that kind of pops up for that Boolean search that you do will also be the one that you'll use. So I wouldn't say there's one that you should use versus other. I do want to call out though that Dice is specifically for folks in IT. And if you want to create your own profile on Dice and put it out there, you will get inundated, and you will get inundated with emails that maybe are roles that you're not looking for. But it is a good way to practice, and it is a good way to start getting your spiel down on what you do, what you want to do, and employers that you want to work for. I mentioned Hired.com. Hired.com is another platform that you can use, and you will, once you create your profile, get inundated with emails and calls and job opportunities. It could be a good thing for you. It could be terrible for you. You may have too much on your plate, and it may take away from you actually focusing on the company or job that you want. But again, it's a great way to get yourself out there and really get used to speaking with recruiters.
Can I ask a question, John?
Yes, please.
So there are a lot of concerns that applicants may have in regards to applying or posting profiles on these mega job search sites, like some of the ones you have listed here. But there's also been concerns about keeping their identity safe. when they're setting up those profiles. Do you have any advice on how to balance that, you know, getting yourself out there, but at the same time trying to protect your identity?
Absolutely. You know, I have seen profiles that will put their name as John F., for example. So their full name and identity is somewhat hidden. You don't have to put your phone number, to the best of my knowledge, on some of these platforms. In fact, platforms like Hired, they actually won't email you directly. You'll be working through that platform with communication with the recruiter or hiring manager. So there's no need for, I guess, identity concern. But with some profiles like a Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Dice, if you do want to keep that in top of mind about keeping your identity protected, you could always just do what I mentioned. Just put your first name, last initial, just your email address. In fact, I would actually recommend creating an email address that is just for your job prospecting.
Thank you. Great advice. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions before we move on? Okay.
So far, so good.
Very good. So what happens to everything after I submit my application? What's the process like? This is pretty much soup to nuts right now. So you submit your application. It's received in an applicant tracking system, an ATS. A recruiter is most likely the one that's going to be reviewing your resume. A hiring manager may be doing it. 90% of the time, it's a recruiter. The recruiter is looking for the main components that they need to move forward with the screen. So if you are a finance major with no IT experience and submitting yourself to an IT role, you're not going to get that first round pre-screen. And that's what the recruiter is kind of vetting out in that application review process. I know, Tam, we talked about this before, like how long does that take for a recruiter to review a resume? 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds if they're really taking a long time. They're really looking for the buzzwords, the amount of experience that seems needed for that role. They're looking at your proposed desired salary that you put in the application and make sure that's in line, which is why sometimes it's best to put negotiable in that application section. We'll go through why that may be a plus and a con, but if you're unsure what to put, negotiable is always completely acceptable. So the recruiter reviews your resume, reviews your application, and is essentially going to be the one reaching out to you for your pre-screen. We'll go through more in depth what that pre-screen will contain, but essentially after that pre-screen, the recruiter will submit your information to the hiring manager for the interview process, for things to begin. So this breakdown right here is if everything is going positively. We can talk about what happens if you're cut any point in the process, but this is right here if you're going from apply to offer. So first round with the recruiter goes great. He or she submits you to the hiring manager. Hiring manager gives their input. Great, we want to go ahead and move forward to a first round interview. The recruiter would be the one reaching out to you, giving you the good news, and essentially setting up that interview. Now, it could be a recruiter doing it themselves or a recruiting coordinator that is in process with the recruiter for this next step. But essentially, you'll do the first round with the hiring manager. If that goes well, they'll move you to multiple rounds. Sometimes it's kind of stop and go, but essentially that's what's going to happen. And then the team's going to meet with each other to discuss, is this person the right fit for the role? Why not? And then hopefully you are. After negotiations will take place, that's typically with the recruiter, and then an offer is made. And we'll go through that in more detail as well. But this is, I guess, the ideal process on how it looks on its face. Now, this could be deviated from in terms of company to company. There may be extra layers, there may be less layers, but this is pretty much how an offer is made. So that was a lot of information. Do we have any questions on that?
I think everyone is still processing.
That's good. We're going to go back to all these steps in more detail too. So
yes. But are there any general advice you can share in regards to how to get through the ATS system?
Definitely. In fact, I'm going to call that out in the next slide, so I'll save the best to come after this. Good question.
Great. And then a question just came up and it says, do you have certain keywords matching in the ATS? So I think you're going to cover that as well.
Yeah, these are great questions. I'm actually going to cover these in the next slide, so I'll defer and then we can kind of come back to these questions, revisit them. But definitely, like for example, if I'm applying for a sales role, but I don't have the word sales or client or interaction in my resume, is that going to hurt my chances? Maybe. So getting to know your recruiter. Essentially, the recruiter is the gatekeeper. This is the person who's going to decide whether you should or should not go to the next steps. What is the pre-screen of the recruiter going to look like? So they're going to reach out. They're going to give you some insight on the company you're applying for, of the role of the team. They're going to talk about the core skills, the BQs, basic qualifications of the role, and also going to talk to you about your experience of whether you meet those basic qualifications. But ultimately, what they're looking for is, do you meet the basic requirements? Is there any desired requirements that you need? Do they really think you're a good fit for the role? And are you in salary range? And we'll talk about how to negotiate or how to navigate those conversations with the recruiter. But at the end of that conversation, they should be able to tell you, yes, we are going to move forward, or no, we are not, because XYZ, if there's a certain basic requirement that you don't meet. But ultimately, you want to put your best foot forward with the recruiter, so they want to present you, and so they're excited about presenting you. I put in a tip, they want you to get the job. And I think that's something I'll kind of emphasize during our presentation is the recruiter wants you to get hired. This recruiter is probably dealing with a number of different candidates and a number of different requisitions. And every single candidate they speak with is a potential hire for them. And which means that a potential, I don't want to put it so crassly as saying a less of a rec that they have to deal with. But essentially, when they're dealing with multiple recs, they want to fill this role with the best person and then move on to the next role. Now, the hiring manager is going to be vetting you out further, so they know 1000% you're the right person for the job. But the recruiter is going to be on your side all the way up into the whole entire process because they want you to get this job, essentially. Now, there are two different types of recruiter that you'll be dealing with. There's an internal recruiter, so that's the person who's working directly for the company that you're applying for. They're not the middleman between the hiring manager and the and getting hired. So there's an external recruiter that sometimes you'll be working with. It depends on the role that you're applying for. They're essentially a third-party agency that has been tapped on the shoulder by the recruiter or the hiring manager to help fill that role. They are kind of an outsider looking in, and they don't typically have direct access to the hiring manager. Sometimes they do. They don't have access to the ATS, the applicant tracking system. They're typically the ones that are sourcing you on like a LinkedIn or a Hired or whatever platform that you're on. They are really rooting for you because they want you to get hired so they can get paid. They usually get a percentage off the salary that you're making, or there's a markup on your hourly rate that they send to the prospective employer. And is there a better way of going about it than the other? I don't think so. You know, sometimes it's very valuable to be working with an external recruiter. Sometimes it's better to work with an internal recruiter because you have better access to the hiring manager. But at the end of the day, it's all about how you can get in front of the hiring manager, how you can get in front of the employer, and start the interview process. Any questions on this slide? No?
No questions so far.
Perfect. So this is something that I think everyone will find very valuable, and this is discussion of compensation expectations. What do I say? What do I not say? How do I put myself in the right range for the role without without putting myself in a range that's going to be so siloed that I'm getting less than what I am targeting. So the first thing I wanted to cover is the fact that you don't have to give the number of what your salary expectations are. This is essentially how the recruiter screen is going to look. At the end of going through the role, the company, your experience, the question is going to come up typically on the first round screen. What are you targeting for this position? They won't ask you what your current salary is. That is illegal in most states, I should say, but they will ask you what your range is. They want to know that you're in the right range for the role. If you know your range and know the range in this desired industry and type of role, feel free to give it. There's not a bad answer there, but if you really just want to keep that open-ended, you will not get dinged if you say, you know, I'd really like to learn more about the role and I'm negotiable. Can you please tell me what the range is? And when you do ask the recruiter that, they actually have to say to you what the range is. They may give you a very large range and say it's dependent on experience, but they should give you some type of range on what you can work on. But as mentioned in that previous slide, the recruiter does want to know if you are in range, and they'll make sure that they have that kind of number range down before proceeding. So if they give you a range and say, this role is at 50 to 60,000, is it acceptable for you to move forward? I would advise that you say yes or no, or what is your range? Because if you do not, there's going to be hesitation on putting you forward to the hiring manager. I'll pause there for a second because there's only 3 sentences here, but this is a lot of the kind of meat behind your first round screen with the recruiter. Any questions at all? Okay, moving on.
Yes, we do have a question.
Okay.
We have a couple of questions. So the first question is, when should we discuss the salary before getting an offer? Before getting an offer or after?
Before and after. So I know it might be a little confusing, but you're going to be asked in the pre-screen with the recruiter what your targeted salary range is. I would recommend giving it. If you know what you're targeting and what is in range market-wide for your role, then I would just say, look, I'm targeting somewhere in the 50 to 60,000 range. If they say to you, great, really appreciate that, this role is capped out at 55,000. Is that okay to move forward? Yes, it is. Great. If it's more and you just shot yourself in the foot because you gave a targeted salary that's less than, you could always negotiate that further. You're not held to those numbers if it's if you want to negotiate, and we'll talk about how to properly negotiate as we move on. But I would say honesty is always the best policy, and be forthright. But again, you can't ask the recruiter what the salary range is, and they have to give it to you.
Okay, we have a few more questions that came in.
Yeah.
The next question is, what if we say expected salary, then what the recruiter wanted to offer? So what if we say expected salary, then what the recruiter wanted to offer?
So if it's more than what the recruiter wanted to offer?
That's what it sounds like. Imran, if you want to unmute yourself for clarification. If not, then
I'll kind of run with that question.
Yes, actually, sorry about that. I meant, what if we say our expected salary is higher? Let's say I say 150K, and the recruiter had in mind that if they want to recruit somebody at around 120 or 130.
They'll tell you. They'll tell you. So if you're targeting 150K and they say to you, look, really appreciate your application and your interest in this role, I want to be forthright with you and let you know that the cap on the salary is 120. We really couldn't go higher than that. Then it's really up to you, the candidate, to say, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, but this seems to be the wrong role for me. Or you can say, that's fine. I would wish to proceed further, and I'll keep that cap in mind. It really depends on you, though.
Okay.
awesome.
The
Thank you.
recruiter will give you that out too. They're not going to move you in the process and take up your time and have you interview with everybody and then say, oh, by the way, 120 is the cap. Like they want expectations to be very visible, so they're not wasting your time or their time.
My concern was, what if, let's say they have to make a tough choice between the two candidates, and then they are in the final stages. Now they're asking them what's their price or what salary are they expecting. So what's places where you would look at beforehand, so at least one candidate have a better idea on what to ask for?
Oh, so you're looking at different types of salary, like aggregators, like salary market tools that you can look up to say, hey, I just graduated college. I'm a, let's say, Java developer, for example. What does a entry-level Java developer make in the US right now on average? Is that the question? That's it. So it's funny, I looked this up, but I didn't include it. I can send you different salary market tools. LinkedIn has it on there. So does Indeed. It's funny because as you start applying to roles, you'll see a little section on the bottom of the job that says the average salary for this role is 70,000. I would take that with a grain of salt because sometimes they're not utilizing the search properly. But that's why I would kind of look towards the recruiter to say, hey, you know, what am I, this is my comp expectation. Is this in line for what the market holds? But I would do your own research on those compensation tools that you could find on Google. If you literally Google compensation tool, there'll be a bunch of different websites coming up.
Okay.
So John,
Sounds good. Thank you.
So John, would those include such as Glassdoor or PayScale in addition to LinkedIn?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And then if they're looking more so at, for example, higher education institutions, then there's different sites that would show the different ranges. So for example, if they're individuals looking to work at a public institution, then each state or at different states, there are different websites that will post salary ranges for different type of positions for those type of roles at public institutions,
Yep.
government agencies as well.
Yeah, and thanks for calling that out, because I mean, you're right, the public sector versus the private sector, you're going to find different compensation ranges. Remote versus non-remote, I mean, in this environment that we're right now, there is sometimes differentiation in salary based on remote versus on-site. So there's a lot of different factors that these compensation tools take into account to make sure they're giving you the most accurate range.
And I think that covers the next question that was in the chat and said, how do we compare compensations with industry averages? I think we just covered that. And
yeah, I would look at those compensation aggregators and search tools. They can take everything into account about location, industry, job title, and I would play around with the job title, financial analyst versus financial sales representative versus, you know, banker. Like there's so many different titles out there, and they use each one on average to give the correct job comp range.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just a few more. One participant wanted to just make sure they heard everything correctly. Did you say that it is illegal for companies to know your salary? So can you talk about that a little more?
It depended on state. So I'll tell you what the standard is, and then it's going to depend on what state that you're in. I'm going to assume we're all in Illinois right now. So Illinois is one of the states where the recruiter cannot ask you what you're currently making. They can ask you what you're targeting, what you're expecting. Are we okay to move forward at this range? What they can't say is, what are you currently making? That is not allowed. Similar to New York and California. Now, I think what most recruiters, including our team, has done is take that nationwide, because we don't want to get caught into a situation where not being compliant with EEOC. and saying, hey, we're recruiting for a position in Oklahoma, which I don't believe that law is in effect in. We're recruiting into a position in Oklahoma, and then now we're recruiting back into Illinois, and oops, I messed up my script and I asked them what their current compensation is. So that's why most employers right now are taking the standardized question on what your desired salary is, what you're expecting, rather than what you're currently making.
Great, thank you. So one participant stated that they heard that you should not ask about salary in first round interviews, but it sounds like you are saying you can ask in the first round interview. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then the follow-up is that, what if the recruiter does not bring it up in the first round? Should the applicant bring the question up?
I would. I really would. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing your time to the best of your ability, and so does the recruiter. So I would be surprised if the recruiter does not bring it up in the first round. It would kind of put a little flag over my head saying, why didn't they, to be quite honest with you? Unless you put it in the application, he or she may just say, okay, great, I see that you applied with the targeted range of X amount. And they may just leave it at that. But essentially, it is something that I would recommend getting out of the way in the first round pre-screen and really not bringing up with the hiring manager. So there is a difference between a pre-screen and an interview. The pre-screen with the recruiter is to make sure that everything is in line. The interview with the hiring manager, I wouldn't recommend bringing up compensation at all, because I would say those conversations with the recruiter. The hiring manager already has your notes from the recruiter, already understands what you're targeting, and typically does not bring that up. The recruiter you can kind of think of as like the liaison between you and the hiring manager. Would I want to have to negotiate with my direct manager? I wouldn't. I'd rather negotiate with the recruiter who's working with the hiring manager to make me an offer. So at the end of the day, to move forward, I would ask that simple question. Hey, I put my targeted salary range down as 60,000. Is that in line with the expectations for this role? It's a perfectly acceptable question, and I would want to know it before moving forward.
That's a great approach. Thank you for sharing that. And then I have one more question. What do you do when an application requires a number for salary? It does not allow, use the term negotiable, and in some cases won't allow a range, meaning you have to put an exact dollar amount.
Well, there's a little trick that I've seen a lot of candidates do and put down 0. Now, I kind of don't recommend that, but if you don't feel comfortable putting your salary range, you can do that. And if they like your experience enough, they'll look at your application, talk to you and say, hey, I see you put your targeted application or targeted salary as 0. I'm assuming that's negotiable. And what are you targeting more for this role? And then the conversation can evolve from there. And then deferring back to this slide, you can say, hey, I put it down because I'm negotiable and really wanted to learn more about the role. Can you provide me with a range for this position? And then the dance begins. You talk through that with the recruiter and make sure that you're giving them what you want to, and they'll also want to make sure that you're in line for the right range. I think most companies right now are making it a negotiable option there. If not, you can put down 0. It may hurt you. You may just want to put down a high range or a low range on what you're targeting. And then when you talk through with the recruiter, say, hey, I put down 50,000, but just so you know, I'm targeting somewhere between 50 and 65,000. Perfectly acceptable.
Thanks, John. I think that covers, and this is great information, especially, as candidates go through the challenges of filling out online applications and talking to recruiters. So those are all the questions that appeared in the chat.
Good. No, those great questions. And I hear where you're coming from, because I've been there myself. I'm, still kind of in that seat where, it's kind of hard to discuss with the hiring manager, which is why you want to utilize that recruiter for these conversations. Follow up. So I'm emphasizing that you follow up in this slide in case you didn't notice. So there is a lot of recruiters out there that are dealing with sometimes more than 50 candidates per week. I would follow up with a recruiter as soon as you get off the phone call with an email, and maybe the week after if you haven't heard back from them. There is a kind of fine line between inundating them with emails and being completely silent. I would defer to you. If it's a job you're really excited about, one email per week is totally fine. Maybe the beginning of the week and the end of the week is kind of a little much, but either way, it makes you stand out and it shows your level of professionalism, which we'll talk about in kind of email formats later on. But a simple follow-up saying, thank you for your time. I enjoyed speaking with you, learning about the position. I'm excited for next steps. It makes a difference. And as a recruiter who's dealing with, like I said, many candidates per week, you sometimes forget about ones that stay silent, and the ones that are more active and more vocal tend to be top of mind. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak, and that's definitely very true in this instance. So these are just little tips that I kind of find work for certain candidates and don't work well for others. And again, putting your best foot forward is really what I want to teach you about. And certain emails that are better versus the ones that are not so great tends to make an impression on a recruiter or definitely in a hiring manager. Again, follow up to the first initial reach out, given your times, keeping positive. I look forward to your response. I look forward to speaking with you are all really nice things. Pleasantries go a long way. I don't see this a lot as much as I used to, and I think it's a really good practice, is actually creating a signature for your personal email, especially if you are creating an email account just for job seeking. It's a really nice touch, and it kind of reinforces, oh, okay, I have all the information right here to get everything scheduled. It makes things quick and easy. I see emails alternatively where it says I'm available now to speak, or just one time for availability. These little things can hurt you in the entirety of the process. And if if a recruiter is dealing with multiple candidates and is not really has to keep emailing you back and forth 4 different times, it tends to hurt you. So just to kind of wrap everything up on the job search side, because that was a lot, it's a numbers game. The more jobs that you apply to, the more interviews you'll have, the better your confidence will be in the interview process. And hopefully you'll get to a spot where all employers want you and you have multiple offers that you can choose from. And that really is the goal here, is to have multiple offers. You can look at it, reinforcing that bullet point before where it's a full-time job, searching for jobs. So just emphasizing that in this slide. Okay, resume writing. I heard this quote somewhere and I thought it was worth mentioning. You are perfect twice in your life, when you were born and when you write your resume. I really like that. And really what it means is make your resume as your bragging rights. You essentially want to sell yourself on your resume with all factual accounts, obviously, but really putting in your sales pitch for why you're a good fit for the job, why you're an added value to the organization. And there's certain techniques in writing a resume that really stand out. We'll go through those a little later, but I would just kind of keep that in mind while you're doing your resume. There can be a whole hour-long kind of discussion on resume writing in and of itself. I'm sure most people on this call have a resume already, and you may want to tweak it along the way, but it's something to keep in mind. So this is kind of the number one tip when you start applying to roles. And when more specifically, you're really honed in on a specific company or job that you want to have, certain tips to get you through the recruiter. So as we mentioned before, your resume is submitted into an applicant tracking system. The recruiter reviews it, and their eyes are kind of fixed towards certain words that are used a lot in the job. So I put in a job description, more specifically the basic requirements for a job that we have posted right now. And I highlighted some of those jobs, some of those words to kind of focus in on what you should look at when you're looking at a job description. So this is a sales-based role. What's the correct word to put in your resume if you're in sales? Is sales, obviously. And you may have worked in sales in some way, shape, or form, but maybe it doesn't really stand out if you're a client service rep, for example. If you're in retail and you're working in customer service, there is certain sales aspect to the role. So again, it's not being dishonest, but if you're able to put that forward in your resume and kind of have it stand out a little bit, I think it'll help your chances in getting through the first round. And the recruiter can look through and say, okay, this isn't relevant sales experience, or it is. But those words that you'll see on the job description are very much advised to include on your actual resume. So at the end of the day, while you're doing a job search, you may have 5 different resumes, and I would separate those out. This is my sales-based job. This is my maybe client service-based job, that, you know, or resume, I should say. You may have a whole lot of resumes flying out there, and it's okay to have more than one at the end of the day. List accomplishments for sure. It's a big piece that employers are looking for, even if it's in a school setting or project setting. It's a very nice thing to have. And I know this is something I get asked a lot, is do I need to send a cover letter? Maybe, but not really. I know that's a very vague answer, but at the end of the day, the recruiter is most likely looking at your resume and not looking at your cover letter. It's very nice. It's a nice touch. And if you want to write something specific to the organization and why you would be a good fit and an asset, then I think it's great. But I'm still kind of torn on whether it's a must-have at the end of the day.
We have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So the first question is, what do you advise to someone with 0 years experience to stand out?
So I would recommend writing about yourself then. You know, we'll look through what sample resumes in a bit. So you've graduated college and you've had different projects that you've worked on in college. Build on that. Build on the summary about yourself. I thrive in a fast-paced environment. I am looking to be a valued member of your team because, you know, there's certain, I don't want to call it fluff, but there's certain filler that you could put in there in order to really separate yourself from somebody who has more experience but doesn't write those pleasantries on their resume. So there could be a whole course around writing resumes with no experience. What I would advise on, kind of moving back to this bullet point, is taking some of these buzzwords, not copying the sentence word for word, but creating something of yourself. I am a responsive person who values client success and maintains a positive attitude throughout my school career. I'm looking to bring that polishedness into an organization. I don't know, I'm kind of winging it right now, but essentially you can build upon your resume with your education and really what you're seeking, which is why you may have a lot more than 5 different versions of your resumes, depending on the job that you're looking for, if you have no experience.
Great, thank you. And then another participant asked is, do you know someone in the USC Career Center who could provide resume critiques? So do you know someone from the Career Center who can provide resume critiques? And the answer is yes. Every career advisor in the USC Career Services office will be able to assist you with a resume critique. But keep in mind that there are some colleges that have career centers. So for example, if you are a student in the business school, there is the Business Career Center. Or if you are an engineering or computer science major, there is the Engineering Career Center. And it's also, if you are a student of the LAS, Liberal Arts and Sciences, there is the Liberal Arts and Sciences Career Development Internship Office, and along with School of Public Health. So those, depending on your school, there are career centers and career advisors there to assist you, as well as the advisors in the Career Services office. So I just want to respond to that one. And then another person said, do you need a cover letter if you are changing careers? And John, you had stated earlier in response to doing it to send a cover letter, you were saying it depends. I think that really depends on the industry and the area. because I know for some areas and then for some hiring managers, many of them do review the cover letters. I think that for me as a hiring manager, that's one of the things that I look at in addition to the resume. So I agree with you that it depends, but I would probably err more so as a candidate. I would probably err more on the side of having the cover letter, but also specifically following the instructions in the job description when they say submit cover letter with resume. So I would err on the side of having the cover letter because it's a safe practice. But if they say just to submit the resume, then follow the instructions on submit the resume. But if it says submit application, I would recommend that you err on the side of submitting the cover letter with the resume. So I just want to throw that out there just for clarification, but I agree with you that it would depend. But I would say pay close attention to the job description and the application instructions that go along with that.
Absolutely. One thing about cover letters, it is a great practice. Absolutely. More is always better than less in these circumstances. One thing to maybe be aware of is don't have the same cover letter, just like you wouldn't have the same resume for multiple roles. If it's gonna take away from what your resume brings to the table, or also including something like in the career transition theme of things in your summary at the very top of your resume, in addition to your cover letter, say, 5+ years in retail, looking to make a transition to the financial sector because, or, my skills are attuned more to finance because, just something to play around with in the summary of your resume is always a good touch too. It is a good practice though, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And we have one more question, then I have a follow-up question after this one. So the question in the chat is, any other advice for someone changing careers, especially with getting past the ATS screening stage?
Yes. It'd be reaching out to people in the organization that you feel are going to be the ones that are reviewing your resume. So if you are going into marketing and you see a marketing director in the same location of the role that you're applying to at the same company you're applying to, it's a very nice thing to do, which they would appreciate if you are a good fit for the role, is saying, "Hi, I thought it would be great if we connect on LinkedIn. I just applied to this role and I'd love to learn more. I'm making a transition in my career to marketing," for example. Reaching out to the recruiters themselves is a good practice as well, just connecting with them and then learning more about the role via LinkedIn. Some of them would respond directly saying, "Thank you for your application, but unfortunately we're looking at other candidates at this time," or they'll give you a phone call just to talk through that a little bit more. But either way, you're getting past that hurdle of submitting into an ATS and maybe not hearing back because your core skills are not the right fit. That is a way around it.
Thank you. So I like how you highlighted the keywords in the job description. What we always encourage our advisees, meaning students and alumni, to do is to make sure you are going through and studying and reviewing the job description in detail to highlight, and that's key to help with the customization of their application to recruiters. But I've also learned that there are candidates who, to get through the ATS screening, they take certain keywords and they put it at the bottom of their resume and change the font color from black to white to try to find a way to kind of sneak through the ATS. So have you experienced something like that from your end as a recruiter?
If I have, I didn't notice it. That's a good trick. So my eyes work top to bottom in the resume, and it also works in terms of relevant experience, recent experience. If it's a lengthy resume with all those buzzwords at the very bottom, I actually wouldn't think that would be it wouldn't be a standout resume for me. If they're spread throughout the resume and they're obviously in the most recent experience and in the summary or in the core skills kind of summary area, that's a big plus. So just taking all these things and putting them into a bullet at the very bottom, it wouldn't be a slam dunk for me as a recruiter to say, oh, I need to talk to this person.
Thank you.
And you know, just one call out, the ATS puts your resume forward regardless. Typically the recruiter will screen and look at the resume most of the time, if not all the time. So I wouldn't say that your resume will just get knocked out of consideration if you don't have the right skills based on those keywords. So that's something else to keep in mind. At least with our ATS. Maybe there's more advanced, evolved ATSs out there that can do that, but depends.
Got it. Thank you. So there was a follow-up comment in response to your question regarding any additional advice to get through and connect with them to get through the ATS. You talk about connecting with other individuals as part of the company. There was a response to say, I could see reaching out to recruiters, but reaching out to others seems like an intrusion. Do you feel that if a candidate wants to connect with other people as part of the company would be considered to be an intrusion?
LinkedIn is a public site and people are on there for the reason of networking. So I'll talk about sales roles really quick because that is a little independent of other organizations. If somebody applied to a role and reached out to a hiring manager in sales and said, I just applied to this sales associate role, I would really love to learn more from your perspective and I feel I'd be a great fit. Oh my, that manager would come to me right away and said, I love this person's tenacity and please screen them if you have not already. That's a big plus. Now, some hiring managers aren't as active on LinkedIn and won't give as much attention to a candidate reaching out to them. The LinkedIn invite only gives you a certain amount of characters. So I don't feel like it's being intrusive. It's going to be hard to do it to every single job and to every single hiring manager because it's going to take up a lot of your time. But if there's a really focused company and job that you're looking at, and this is the one, I got to have it, I don't feel it's intrusive. I think it's I think they would feel pretty darn special at the end of the day.
Awesome. I got a couple of more questions that came in through the chat. The first one says, in terms of the hiring process, is there a difference between an internship and a real job? Interesting.
Good question. You know, internships are real jobs at the end of the day. I mean, some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid, but essentially it is experience that you're putting on your resume. Most roles are advertised as internships versus a full-time position. And typically a recruiter will tell you, this is an internship with a projected start date of X ending Y. So you're aware that it's not a full-time position with benefits, et cetera. And sorry, I can't remember the question now, but essentially roles are advertised as internships versus non-internships, and it is very much a real job.
Yes, he was asking if there's a difference between the internship for the hiring process. Is there a difference for the hiring process? Is there a difference between an internship and a real job?
It depends. It depends on how many interns they're looking to hire and the hiring manager's needs. So I've been a part of different size organizations. I've been a part of GE, which is a mega corporation. And I've been on the college campus recruitment sites where you're literally speaking with one of the recruiters or one of the intern leads, talking to the interns, moving them through the process. And by the end of that process, you would have an internship. And then we have roles posted at the company I'm at right now, which is more mid-size. And we post a role and really treat the interns as we would a candidate. We screen them, make sure everything is in line, send them to the hiring manager, same process as such. So it's going to depend on the size of company and their girth of their intern requirements. You know, when you go to these mega corporations, they'll have 100 internship roles, and it's much different than going into a role that's sponsoring one internship role. So it depends.
So the process depends not only just the size of the organization, but what they're looking for in terms of the candidates and the steps that they want to go through in terms of screening the candidates for their final individuals that they wish to hire.
I mean, it is similar in the sense that you're having a screen, you're having an interview, although the interview may be very short in terms of the larger organizations with multiple roles. And they're also telling you pretty much up front, look, this is our hourly range for this role. That's usually not negotiable. So that's something to keep in mind. The length of the job is also usually not negotiable. They're looking to keep it for summer, for winter, et cetera. So there's a little bit more harder requirements or restricted requirements when it comes to internships than they are full-time roles.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question for now is, do you think LinkedIn Premium is worth paying for?
I use it from a recruiting perspective, and for a recruiting perspective, absolutely. I do not even know what it costs from a candidate perspective, to be quite honest with you. So I would be very interested in looking in that. I don't know. I'll be very honest with you. I would put yourself on LinkedIn, put yourself out there, putting the open to hired, connecting with people and seeing where that takes you. If you're not getting anywhere, maybe it's worth that extra cost to be a premium member of LinkedIn. On its face right now, I would say no.
The participant responded, it's like it's about maybe $30 a month for the premium.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's not bad. I would actually be very curious on seeing what difference there is from being a premium LinkedIn member from a non-premium member, and how that's going to increase your reach outs, recruiters reaching out to you, that is. I'm a recruiter at the end of the day, and I use it for, reaching out to candidates. I actually don't have any visibility whether they're premium members or non-premium members. One thing I'll say, and this is good practice, especially when looking to beef up your LinkedIn profile, start connecting with people. And they could be people that you know or don't know and just want to make the connection to. But I do have visibility on how many connections you have. And so I'll see if it's under 500, that you're not very active on there and that you kind of don't use it that much, or I'll just say 500 plus, and I'll say, wow, this person is very much connected to folks and treats their LinkedIn profile more serious than the next. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Please.
So, well, I from a candidate perspective, and I've been a candidate as well as a hiring manager, as a student, I just can't see the cost. So from a budget perspective, I would really hesitate to pay the premium, but that's me from a student perspective. But I agree with you. I would be curious to see if that premium access will make a difference. That would be a curious option to look into if it was in my budget.
Yeah, sure. There may be a big added plus to it. I'm actually going to look into that a little further. I've never done that before.
Right. So when you were talking about looking at a person's profile and you'll see how many connections, is it more important in terms of the connection, or is it more important in terms of how engaged they are with, let's say they may not have 500 connections, but they may have 250 connections, but they're very engaged in terms of their interactions and posting comments or information that's related to their field on a regular basis. Does that make a difference from your perspective as a hiring manager or recruiter?
I'll look at it from a sales perspective again, because that's kind of top of mind for me right now, because we're doing a huge hiring in sales in our organization. It's in sales, for example, it's all about the number of connections you have. And if they're very much engaged on LinkedIn, I'll be able to see that. And so will a hiring manager. But sometimes we don't look into exactly what you posted and how much you posted. It's more about the number of connections you have. Mm-hmm. And sometimes your eyes go right to that. I honestly don't think it's a make it or break it. And it's a nice to have at the end of the day. but I may not be looking at all your posts and what you, you know, have contributed to for posts. It is nice though that that the candidate would be active on LinkedIn and is very, you know, kind of engaged in it.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. We are less than 15 minutes away from our wrap up, so we'll go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, I think we're almost at the end here. So this is a quick kind of shout out to resume writing. Traditional versus modern resume formatting. I'm not comparing myself to Marissa Mayer in any way, shape, or form. This was the past CEO of Yahoo, but I loved her resume and I loved this format. And I actually duplicated my resume similar to this kind of format, and I didn't see any difference. Now, if you're in UI, UX, design, etc., your resume is almost like a insight to your design perspective. So I would recommend it. But just keep in mind, a very clean, clear, concise resume is the way to go. One page. I don't care if you have 10 years of experience. Sometimes one page is really, really key. And I hear from a lot of hiring managers is I have to read 5 pages of resumes. Is, you know, why could they not create that more clear and concise? And I think it's a valid reason. Something to keep in mind, if you absolutely cannot make it 1 page or 2 pages, you know, try to relook at it and see if you can condense just a little bit to at least 2 pages. But again, there's a different style of resume formatting and it's really personal preference. But if you're able to talk about your experience in a clear and concise manner, which is what you're going to want to do in the interview stage, then it should come across on your resume as well.
Before you were halfway through covering this section, we received some comments in the chat. So I'm going to start with the first question of, I see there's color being used in the modern resume formatting. Does that matter to you from your perspective as a recruiter?
Not at all. In fact, if I looked at 2 of these resumes, I wouldn't say I'm going with this person versus the other one. It's more content at the end of the day. The reason I called it out is for the fact that there really isn't a preference most of the time. Again, depending on if you're going into like a UI, UX design type of role, there's sometimes no difference. I'll even call this out because I'm sure we'll get this question. Should I put my photo on my resume? You don't have to. Definitely don't have to. Put your LinkedIn on there. The hiring manager, the recruiter will go to LinkedIn sometimes regardless. I wouldn't say it's a must-have.
Okay, that answered the next question. So I'm going to go to the, or comment, I should say. I'm going to go to the next comment and say, I heard that ATS does not do well with any tables, columns, text boxes, and headers/footers. Is that true?
You know, all ATSs are a little bit different in their own way, and some of them are more functional than others. I haven't had a scenario come up where I wasn't able to read it. So I would say no, but maybe there's another recruiter out there with another ATS that says I can't read tables. So I kind of don't know that one. Most of the time we'll be able to read, as long as it's in a PDF or Word format, which is typically how you have to submit it. That's usually fine.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to go to interview tips because we have 2 slides left, and I know we have 9 minutes left, and this is kind of a big one. So things that you should be prepared for in the interview process. I would definitely be prepared to have a few behavioral-based questions ready to answer. They may not be the ones that are going to be asked of you, but maybe you can kind of twist it to that. Just look up online, behavioral-based questions. Tell me about a time when you went above and beyond what was asked for you to make a sale. Tell me about a time when you went above and beyond what was asked for you to create a positive client experience. These are all behavioral-based questions, and you'll most likely get asked one throughout the interview process. Sometimes there's no right or wrong answer, but they want to see how your mind works and how you're able to adapt to those types of questions and talk about how your experience is aligned to those questions. So really important. I would have your let's say 5 minute, but let's try to say 2 to 3 minute summary of experience down. So in the recruiter screen, they'll give you the full insight about the job, talk to you about the company, etc., and then say, well, I'd love to hear about your own career and about your career progression. Can you walk me through that. And then starting with school up into your experience and where you're currently at, you know, maybe it's a minute sometimes. There's no kind of right or wrong time frame, but if it's too lengthy, that kind of goes back into the clear and concise section that we talked about. Why do you want this job? So I don't know a recruiter that may ask you that question, but it's something you should actually have ready in your mind. Why did you apply to this job? Why are you going through this process? What are your skills that are relevant to this role? I would know that before getting into your pre-screen. The next one, what do you know about your potential employer? I'm sure you've heard this time and time again, is companies want people that want to work for them. And I would come ready with questions with some type of base knowledge about the company and the role to be a little bit dangerous on that pre-screen or interview call, because if you're walking in knowing nothing, it's not a good sign. Ask good questions, have questions ready. This kind of goes back to what do you know about your potential employer, but questions may come up during your pre-screen, during your interview process, I should say, but also have questions ready. You know, tell me about your team and how it's structured. Tell me about what the progression is for this role. I mean, just bad questions are better than no questions, but also make your questions as good as you can. Going back into the follow-up, I would follow up with everybody. If you don't have your hiring manager's email address, which you may not, ask your recruiter to pass along a thank you note to the hiring manager. Make it specific and original. Don't just say something like, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to hearing next steps. Something more specific is, I really appreciated the insight you gave me about the position and about your team. Learning more about it, I feel like it'd be a tremendous asset, because, I mean, there's little niceties that'll take about 5 seconds to write that can make or break it.
This is great. So can I ask a question? Okay, we already have a question that came up in the chat. But before I go there, we always have candidates and I'm speaking from a hiring manager's perspective, is that we've had candidates who have struggled answering the number one most commonly asked question during the interview is the tell me about yourself. Can you offer some tips on how to respond to that question?
Sure. Well, we'll take an example of why you got into the role that you're in, and let's say if it's sales or service. What made you passionate about that? Why you pursued that in college? Where you are right now in your career that kind of got you there. Those are all things that the recruiter, the hiring manager are going to want to hear about, because they're interested in you and how that's going to be relevant to this role that you're applying for and interviewing for. So it could be very quick, or it could be more lengthy. I would say quicker is always better here, but just about how you got to where you are is the kind of mindset you should be into when talking about your experience. I'll use myself really quickly. So I graduated from UIC. I got into recruiting because I like helping candidates and helping people get jobs. And I found a true passion for that. And then that led me to talent management and training people to recruit themselves. I mean, I don't have my spiel ready for this, but essentially you want to give some kind of background about yourself and leading up to where you are right now in your career. And why you're a good fit for the job and why you applied to the job, I think, is what they're going to want to hear as a closer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The question in the chat is, if you see some concerning reviews on Glassdoor, for example, about work culture, is it appropriate to ask for clarification during an interview? If so, at what stage?
I'm mixed on Glassdoor, let me tell you. So for every negative comment, you might get one positive comment, because it's easier to complain than it is to give like positive reviews. There may be opportunity for those types of conversations with the recruiter, and it may be a call out, like saying, hey, I noticed that your benefits on your website or on the Glassdoor reviews have been kind of lagging. Is there anything that you can kind of tell me about that? And then the recruiter will go into more of their sales pitch about why to join that company and why their benefits have increased time and time again. If it's culture based, you know, I see there's some maybe a positive spin on. I was looking at some of your Glassdoor reviews about culture, and I just was curious about in your own words, what your culture is like and what's like working there. There are so many different departments and so many different leaders within an organization that if somebody has one bad experience, it tends to bleed into the whole organization and how it's viewed by everybody. So I would take these things as a good kind of reminder to learn everything about the role before making assumptions. And the hiring manager, at the end of the day, you're going to have to click with your hiring manager. So if you feel like you're clicking with them and they're the right person that you want to work with, that may supersede seeing a bad review on Glassdoor as for the whole organization.
Great, thanks, John. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Okay. So best interview tip of all is to relax. At the end of the day, they want you, they being the recruiter, they being the hiring manager, they want you to get the job. The hiring manager really wants you to get the job. They want you to do well. You know, typically life and death is not on the line here. So just kind of keep that in mind, that put your best foot forward. It's all practice until you actually get the job and start working. And if you need to interview with 10 people before you actually get a job, that's great practice, and think of it as such. Relax. Okay, so we have a minute left. Before we get into actual like Q&A, I did want to call out some jobs happening at DFIN right now. This is the company that I work for. We have entry-level sales and service roles. Sales roles are nationwide in specific locations listed here. We have entry-level client support roles, which are nationwide. You know, essentially, if you're finance-minded and looking to get into a fintech organization, there's some great opportunity in our organization. So definitely wanted to call that out before we end here. But Q&A. Do we have time for Q&A, Tan? Let me know how we are with time.
Well, it's 4:29, but if you are okay with going a few minutes over to answer any questions our participants may have, I'm fine with that if you're okay with that.
I'm absolutely fine for time.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and open up the this Q&A session. If you have any additional questions, feel free to type it into the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, please go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your questions to John.
And while we're doing that, I'm just going to quickly go over one slide because I promised negotiating and we did kind of glaze over that one because of time permitting. So I'll just go ahead and just say this. You will not get declined if you negotiate. There's kind of the stigma that if I counter offer, they may say, well, then you're out. That's not going to happen. If you got to that stage, they want you and they want you to accept the role. And sometimes there'll be opportunity to negotiate. Sometimes there's not. I would keep in mind words from the recruiter, like there's a cap on the salary at, this is a firm offer. That's the language I like to use, because if it is firm, there's really not much wiggle room there. Or top of the range, again, kind of a keyword to keep your ears open for. Be realistic on your expectations and know the average in your salary, what we already talked about, and then just create awareness from the start about when you're ready to start the job. So 2 to 3 weeks is pretty much on average. Anything above 3 weeks tends to get an eyebrow raise. 4 weeks, over 4 weeks is definitely a deal breaker for most employers. But essentially, once, let's say, I, the recruiter, am giving you the offer, I will give you a verbal offer stating what the numbers are, and you don't actually have to say, yes, I'm ready to accept right now, or no, I'm declining right now. Feel free to say, I'd like to take the day to think about it. Can we connect the same time tomorrow? That's a perfectly acceptable response. If you already kind of know it's under your expectations, say something to the effect of, this is a great offer, I'm super excited, but I was hoping it would be at X amount. Is there an opportunity to negotiate further? This is totally fine. Just keep it positive, keep the conversation going, and don't put a hard stop on your number throughout the negotiation process. One thing I'll call out as well is don't lie about having another offer. I feel like this kind of happens throughout different stages where you say, oh, okay, well, what if I say I have an offer in hand and it's at X amount? I really wouldn't recommend that. First of all, you don't want to put that bad foot forward with your employer. But second of all, it usually creates more problems than it does help. So just keep things honest and positive, and you'll tend to get the offer that is both agreeable between you and the employer.
And John, you had mentioned also is to make sure you do your research so that you'll have an idea in terms of what type of range would the candidate will fall in based on, their knowledge and their experiences, but also location, I would add, because cost of living can vary based on where the person will be doing their job. But you also mentioned remote options as well to take into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of employers right now, including us, are just posting on the job title remote. So it's called out plain and simple. Make sure you ask your recruiter, is this a remote opportunity? Is this on site? What are the travel requirements? Those are all great questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So we are still open for any final round of questions. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it into the chat. If not, then I see you already have some thank yous, John, in the chat. So thank you for an awesome presentation. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge with us and offer great advice.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I put my LinkedIn on the slide here. Feel free to connect with me if there's any questions that I couldn't answer. Happy to take it offline. But yeah, always looking forward to connecting with a former alum or current alum.
Or current student. We do have a question. It says, when communicating with recruiters and hiring managers, do you recommend calling them Mr. or Miss or using their first name?
Their first name. I didn't even have to think about it. Honestly, it's a great practice. It's very formal, and especially with the recruiter, the first name is totally acceptable. With your hiring manager, when you're getting on the phone, they'll usually introduce themselves to you as Bob or Sue or whatever. I would say feel free to use the first name. If they call themselves Mr. Smith, maybe do that. But I would say for most processes, they want to keep it as informal and comfortable as possible. And that also goes back to the candidate experience. All employers want you, the candidate, to have a positive experience. That goes back to the Glassdoor reviews, which ultimately will sometimes make or break a hire for them. So it's a nice formality, but I feel it's pretty formal in this day and age and not necessary.
Thank you. And we received some additional thank yous. And then another question, if a recruiter reaches out about a specific position, is it appropriate to ask about other positions if it's not a good fit?
For sure. If you've applied to more than one role and you got reached out to for a specific role, but at the end of that conversation with the recruiter, you don't feel that that's the right move for you in your career, you can absolutely say, hey, I did apply to this other position. Are you the recruiter for that position? They very well may not be. If it's a larger organization, there typically there's a team of recruiters that handle different positions, but it's not inappropriate to ask about a different position. I would say this, don't ask that question until you know the current role that they reached out to you about is not a fit. Because if it's totally different in terms of sector, what that implants is that you don't know what you want, kind of, that you're just throwing your resume out there for any role. So I would make sure you understand everything about the current role that you spoke to them about, and then kind of wait a little bit about the role that you also applied to that you're looking for feedback on. Hopefully that makes sense.
So very helpful, thanks. Another question that came up, or clarification, is that can you explain the differences between the role of a hiring manager and a recruiter again briefly?
Sure. So the role of the actual role of them, not the role that you're applying for.
It says between the role of a hiring manager and a recruiter, the differences between the hiring manager and the recruiter's role.
Oh, sure. So they're partners in the process. The recruiter supports the hiring manager in making the hire. So the recruiter is the HR subject matter expert and understands what processes and questions need to be asked for the hiring manager to advance this candidate through the process. So the recruiter is your point of contact throughout the process. You're typically not working directly with the hiring manager. That's for your benefit. They are also the ones that I mentioned negotiating your salary typically at the very end of the process. They're usually the one kind of gunning for you the whole way through to really kind of drive you through the process and make sure that things are very positive for you throughout the process. So I think at the end of the day, the very simple explanation is you don't report to the recruiter. Once you get hired, you report to the hiring manager. The hiring manager is somebody that is going to further your career in the organization after you're hired. The recruiter is moving on to the next position and the next candidate. I don't want it to sound so kind of crass, like they don't care, because they definitely do, but they're done once you are hired in the door. After that, it's about the hiring manager to progress you into the career, get you trained up, and have you be an effective part of the team.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Any other questions or comments you would like to share with John? Feel free to post it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to. And while we're waiting, John, any other, when you said your final words of advice was just relax, be relaxed in the process, any other suggestions that you may have?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, follow-up is key. I do get feedback from hiring managers, and it's not a deal breaker sometimes, but I do get feedback saying, wow, they were really nervous. And, that's something to keep in mind, is that the more you practice, the more people you'll talk to, the better you'll be at this and the more confident you'll be. So I would take it as a learning experience at the end of the day, because even today, I'm not the perfect interviewer. I, still learn the more I talk to recruiters and the more I talk to hiring managers. Although it's been a while since I interviewed, it's always good practice to kind of get out there and see what roles are out there. But yeah, the more you practice and the more knowledgeable you are about the process and about what each person is doing in the process, I think the less nervous you'll be. And there is something to be said about being over-rehearsed. So prepare your 3 to 5 minute spiel about yourself, prepare, your behavior-based questions, but I would say don't memorize it to the point where you're sounding like a robot and just overly rehearsed. That always tends to get kind of negative comments with hiring managers, like they had their response down and I couldn't get anything out of them beyond that response. So be fluid, take an improv class, I don't know, but always kind of be able to think on your feet is very helpful.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like we are good in the chat. There are no other questions or responses. So again, I would like to take this opportunity, John, to thank you for sharing your knowledge and virtually returning back to UIC to offer advice to our students and alumni and navigating the job market. And you have provided your LinkedIn. So in case anyone wants to connect with you or follow with you regarding any additional questions, feel free to connect with John. And if you need assistance with resumes or cover letters or any part of your job search, we are welcoming all participants to connect with our career services advisors here at UIC. Please note again that a copy of this recording will be shared to all participants. Please give me about 1 to 2 business days to send a copy of the recording. We're also asking you to be so kind to complete a survey that will be included in that email as well. I'm going to end this recording now. So again, thank you, John, for during these session, and we appreciate the time. And thank you all to the participants for attending.